Hello, YouTubers and NFL fans everywhere. This is Matt, the NFL Fanatic, giving you my Week 13 2025 NFL predictions. Well, for the Fanatic this week, it was another positive week. I'm very happy about that. Always, getting winning weeks is always the goal when you do these predictions. Though this week it was a little bit of a rare week in terms of my spread predictions. I had not one, but two pushes. Chicago ended up winning by 3 against Pittsburgh, and Indianapolis ended up losing by 3. So the number 3 was my fortunate or unfortunate number of the day, but that got me the 2 pushes for the week. But that did push my wins and losses to a 7-5 week against the spread overall. So again, an overall good winning week. Straight up, I am happy though. I did get another double-digit week in terms of straight up wins. So last week I went against the spread 7-5-2, and straight up I went 10-4. That equals up to 57.1% against the spread, and straight up it equals 71.4% straight up. But now for the year overall, through 178 games, I am now against the spread 81-94-3, which equals 46.4%. And straight up with the tie against the Cowboys and the Packers, I'm now 118-59-1. So I'm near 60 games above 500. Just for everybody out there for percentages, that equals 46.4% against the spread. And straight up, that equals 66.6% or 2/3. So I am moving, in the right direction. Again, I don't think I'm going to be able to hit my 500 goal with the weeks I've been able to put in against the spread. But definitely straight up, I can definitely climb. I don't know if I'll get 70, but at least I'm climbing in the right direction with the weeks I had. Though with some of the games, though, to be fair, with Seattle and Tennessee, that was a 13-point spread. Tennessee has been the worst team in the league all year, and this was the week they decided to actually play a competent game and play well. So, that was a bit surprising. Dallas, Philadelphia, what a horrendous collapse by the Philadelphia Eagles. After being up 21-0 in the first half, they end up blowing the game 24 by having the Cowboys score 24 unanswered points to win the game 24-21, and giving Dallas a significant and possibly season-saving victory against the Philadelphia Eagles. But that was one of the losses there. And the other two, it was 2 50-50 games. Browns, Raiders, even though I smartly picked the Browns because I thought that game was going to be close enough for a hedge. Though the issue with the Raiders is that they are absolutely garbage. Geno Smith, he played okay, and he wasn't the main reason why they lost. It was the fact that Pete Carroll's Nepo baby kid is still on the squad, even after they fired Tom McMahon about a little under 3 weeks ago. And on Sunday evening, they fired Chip Kelly. So the Raiders are basically trying to find every scapegoat they can, except for Mr. Carroll, who, and I didn't think the Raiders were going to be a great team. I didn't think they would be this bad. To where I will say this again, I objectively think the Raiders need to consider firing Pete Carroll because of how bad this start was. It's not like you can say, hey, they were 8-9 or 9-8, and it was like, okay, Pete was doing what he did in Seattle. Which, again, that was kind of getting stale in Seattle. But in Vegas, that's phenomenal. They would have been thrilled with a winning record. But how bad this is, you could argue he's doing just as bad a job as McDaniels and Pierce, if not worse in some metrics. But the story of that was, the Browns getting 10 sacks, Myles Garrett getting another 3 sacks. So he now has 18 for the year. Here's the crazy thing, if people have not noticed. Myles Garrett through his last 4 games, has 13 sacks. Ryan Burns, who is second in the league in sacks, has 13 sacks. So let's just think about that for everybody in perspective. Myles Garrett could have missed the first 7 games of the year this year, completely have been inactive. In his last 4 games, he has tied this guy in second for sacks, which is absolutely crazy. He is going to break the sack record, and I would tell everybody this as well. Don't be surprised if he could do it not in just the last game, the 17 games, or the 16 games. You could even make an argument for all the old-timers and old heads. He could do it in 14 games back in the 70s. So nobody really should complain about how dominant Myles Garrett is. I mean, this year he's the runaway defensive player of the year. But that was the other loss. So again, 2 50-50 games. I'll take that. I kind of, I learned my lesson a bit. And they had different matchups this week, so I might kind of lean the other way with those. There are no buys this week because it's Thanksgiving. I also do want to say everybody out there, I hope everybody out there that celebrates it in America has a great and happy Thanksgiving. Hope everybody enjoys the family, the food, the fun, and the football. The 4 big F's of Thanksgiving from the Matt the NFL Fanatic to everybody out there watching, to all their families across America. I know Canadians had their Thanksgiving back in October. Happy Thanksgiving from the NFL Fanatic, and I hope everybody and everyone has a great time. And as God is my witness, I thought turkeys could fly, but that's just a reference. Hopefully people get that, but we'll move on. But now, let me get into my predictions for this week. So, on Thanksgiving, let's start here. So, in one of the great NFC North battles, this is actually a pretty impressive Thanksgiving slate, to be honest. But when the 7-3-1 Green Bay Packers travel to Detroit to take on the 7-4 Detroit Lions, the Detroit Lions are 2.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Detroit here minus 2.5, and Detroit straight up. Then the next game, in a big national game, Kansas City, Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, the Dallas Cowboys, the star, Dak Prescott, the middle of the afternoon on Thanksgiving, when the 6-5 Kansas City Chiefs travel to Dallas, they're going to be 5-1 Dallas Cowboys. The Kansas City Chiefs are 3-point favorites in this game. Give me Kansas City here minus 3, and Kansas City straight up. And then lastly, in a nightcap game, when the 3-8 Cincinnati Bengals travel to Baltimore to take on the 6-5 Baltimore Ravens, the Baltimore Ravens are 7-point favorites in this game. Give me Cincinnati here plus 7 to cover, but I'm going to take Baltimore straight up. Then on Black Friday, the second annual Black Friday game, when the 8-3 Chicago Bears travel to Philadelphia to take on the 8-3 Philadelphia Eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles are 7-point favorites in this game. Give me Philadelphia here minus 7, and Philadelphia straight up. Then the next game, when the 8-4 San Francisco 49ers travel to Cleveland to take on the 3-8 Cleveland Browns. The Cleveland Browns are 6-point underdogs in this game. I'm going to take Cleveland here plus 6, but I'm going to take San Francisco straight up. Then the next game, when the 7-4 Jacksonville Jaguars travel to Tennessee to take on the 1-10 Tennessee Titans. The Jacksonville Jaguars are 6.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Jacksonville here, minus 6.5, and Jacksonville straight up. Then the next game, a huge AFC South battle when the 6-5 Houston Texans travel to Indianapolis to take on the 8-3 Indianapolis Colts. The Indianapolis Colts are 4.5-point favorites in this game. In my largest upset of the entire weekend, I am going to take Houston here plus 4.5, and Houston straight up. And I will say that this is sans C.J. Stroud or Davis Mills. I'm going to take the Houston Texans here plus 4.5 to win this game outright, regardless of the quarterback status for either C.J. Stroud or Davis Mills. And in the next game, when the 2-9 New Orleans Saints travel to Miami to take on the 5-6 Miami Dolphins. I believe that's correct. Let's see, 5-6. Or I'm sorry. When the 2-9 New Orleans Saints travel to Miami to take on the 4-7 Miami Dolphins. The Miami Dolphins are 6-point favorites in this game. Give me Miami here minus 6. In Miami, straight up. Then the next game, when the 4-7 Atlanta Falcons travel to the 2-9 New York Jets, the Atlanta Falcons are 2.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Atlanta here, minus 2.5, and Atlanta straight up. Then the next game, when the 3-8 Arizona Cardinals travel to Tampa Bay to take on the 6-5 Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are 3-point favorites in this game, regardless of QB status between Baker Mayfield or Teddy Bridgewater. I'm going to take Tampa Bay here, minus 3, and Tampa Bay straight up. Then the next game, when the 9-2 Los Angeles Rams travel to Carolina to take on the 6-6 Carolina Panthers. The Los Angeles Rams are 10.5-point favorites in this game. I know it's a pretty significant spread to take, but with how the Panthers and Rams played throughout the year, especially with the injuries the Panthers suffered last night, I'm going to take the Los Angeles Rams here, minus 10.5, and Los Angeles Rams straight up. Then the next game, when the 7-4 Buffalo Bills travel to Pittsburgh to take on the 6-5 Pittsburgh Steelers. The Buffalo Bills are 3.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Buffalo here, minus 3.5, and Buffalo straight up. Then the next game, when the 2-9 Las Vegas Raiders travel to Los Angeles to take on the 7-4 Los Angeles Chargers. The Los Angeles Chargers are 9.5-point favorites in this game. Give me the Los Angeles Chargers here, minus 9.5, and the Los Angeles Chargers straight up. Then the next game, in the Sunday night game, when the 9-2 Denver Broncos travel to Washington to take on the 3-8 Washington Commanders. The Denver Broncos are 6.5-point favorites in this game. Give me Denver here, -6.5, and Denver straight up. And lastly, in the Monday night game, when the 2-10 New York Giants travel to New England to take on the 10-2 New England Patriots, the New England Patriots are 7.5-point favorites in this game. Give me New England here, -7.5, and New England straight up. All right, it's time for my thoughts on each game. The Detroit Lions over the Green Bay Packers. This game, it's a unique game. It's Thanksgiving. A couple years ago, when Jordan Love was, kind of going through his ups and downs, it was Thanksgiving in 2023 to where Jordan Love finally started to get on a run. And, they were able to get to the divisional round. They lost to the Niners in a really fun, awkward game, but the Packers had the momentum then. And the Lions, to their credit, the Packers dominated the Minnesota Vikings, stomped them incredibly well. Oh, and then, I had forgot about one spread. Let me bring this up here real quick, and I will put this in. Let's see here, Minnesota-Seattle. I completely forgot to mention that one. 1 second. Let's see, come on. Here we go. All right, Minnesota and Seattle. Let's see, Minnesota and Seattle. Put that in here. Okay. Yeah, and then when the 4-7 Minnesota Vikings travel to the 8-3 Seattle Seahawks, the Seattle Seahawks are 10.5-point favorites themselves. In their game, I'm going to take Seattle here. They're -10.5, and Seattle straight up. So I will put that in there once again. I'm going to take Seattle -10.5, and Seattle straight up. All right, so now let me get back to my thoughts on the pack. Let me restart, and then let me go into my quick thoughts about each game. All right, the Detroit Lions over the Green Bay Packers. Reset there. The Detroit Lions over the Green Bay Packers. I'm going to take the Detroit Lions here based on the fact where, look, the Packers, they have played pretty, solid over the last few weeks. They've had some clunkers of games. Over the last 4 weeks, they lost a 16-13 game to the Panthers. And then, they had that 10-7 loss against the Eagles. But they beat the Giants by 7. And then, they were able to run the ball effectively. Their special teams came up a huge play. And they decisively beat, the woefully, Minnesota Vikings 22-6. So the Packers, and to be fair, the Packers in week 1 absolutely dominated the Detroit Lions defensively. They really couldn't run the ball. They only put up about, I think it was like 22-10, 24-10. Micah Parsons had a big sack, and it was an absolutely dominant performance by the Packers in week 1. A lot's changed. A lot of the talent that was there in week 1 is not there right now. I know Jaden Reed got activated off the IR. Josh Jacobs is dealing with a knee injury. And it's not great if you're the Packers about, where they are maybe holistically offensively. The defense has been outstanding pretty much the entire year. Where Detroit, weirdly enough, it's kind of the opposite, to where the Detroit defense is really what concerns you. The Detroit offense, after being 1-2 last year with Ben Johnson, overall, the points and yards, they're 2nd and 4th. So, and again, objectively, you could cut it off of saying below 500, above 500, and all that. And I get that, and they average about probably 8 points fewer a game against the lowly, when they have double-digit score wins. One-score games, they average about 1 score fewer than they do in games decided by 10 or more points. But, when I look at this game, Packers-Lions, yes, I can trust the Packers defense, and maybe, I can trust the Lions offense to an extent. But I think the Lions, they know what this means, because I think they know that they still can control their own destiny in the division with their win over the Bears already. They're going to have to beat them again in Chicago, which is not going to be an easy feat, as you how the Bears have been playing recently. I just think the Lions know, if they lose this, they're basically out of the division, and they may, surprisingly, which I don't think anybody really would have expected, the Lions right now are the 8th seed in the NFC currently, and I just don't know, with the remainder of their schedule, having to play the Bears again, getting swept by the Packers, if the Bears win the, I don't know if the Lions make the playoffs. I genuinely don't know. And I think the Lions, I think they're healthier, they're more motivated, and I just think with the Packers, they could play a really good game. I just think that Packers offense isn't as explosive. Matt Golden's been out with an injury. Jacobs is still hurt, and I think that's going to be a huge factor. I think Jacobs will play. I just don't know if the Packers on the road, coming off the game they had, looking at, because they played, I think the Lions know. It's like, look, we got fortunate that they were playing the Giants, who blew another fourth quarter double-digit lead. The Lions going to be thankful they won, and you're going to definitely concerned with the Lions' defense, the lack of running game, Jared Goff's up and down game at times, the fact they can't get Jameson Williams active, and they definitely miss Sam Laporta over the middle of the field with Brock Wright taking over for Laporta due to his back surgery. But I think at home, with that environment, with the pressure and the necessity of the Lions, I think they're going to play a much more competitive, more inspired game, and I just trust them a little bit more than the Packers. And I think that Packer defense is going to have a couple more cracks in it, and I just don't know if Jordan Love can handle the pressure up in Detroit. The last year in Detroit, that big Thursday night game, they ended up, winning off a huge fourth quarter gamble. Maybe that turns a bite Dan Campbell in the rear end this year on Thanksgiving. But I'm going to take the Lions here. A little more motivated, a little bit healthier, and I just trust that, Campbell's motivation at home, and looking at the history of this game for the Lions recently, I'll give the Lions the edge in that way. So that's Detroit here -2.5, and Detroit straight up. The next game, the Kansas City Chiefs over the Dallas Cowboys. This one to me comes down to coach and QB. Look, the Dallas defense, to their credit, the Dallas defense has played a much better game over the last 2 weeks. Their run defense has tremendously improved, and George Pickens has definitely played the best football of his entire career. And you can make an argument that over the last, or at least on Sunday, he was the number one receiver, and CeeDee Lamb let the team down. If you were saying, George Pickens is the best receiver in football, I think, this year that has to go to Jackson Smith-Njigba, but I'll talk about him later. And I have been really impressed with how the Cowboys have played. I was surprised, though, that Brandon Aubrey did miss a 50-plus yard field goal. Those are 40-yarders for him usually. I think he said that was only his second miss of the whole season for 50-plus yards, which is more surprising that way. But I think the Cowboys, objectively, at least through your first 2 games, have played a lot better. Yes, I do believe the Eagles maybe more lost that game due to all the turnovers, the Saquon fumble, the Gibson fumble, who, by the way, that bum, Xavier Gibson, needs to be cut. Just like when Aaron Glenn cut him with the Jets, that bum needs to be standing out in the street waiting for a UFL tryout because he basically cost him the game by trying to bring it out and causing the fumble. Even though I know you say, hey, at the end of the day, the Cowboys didn't try to get a field goal there, and they couldn't get it anyway, but still, he put him in that spot anyway. And you look at the Chiefs and go, okay, the Chiefs had to grind out a win. They were down 11 to the Colts. Daniel Jones played a good enough game. I think the big surprise yesterday was on Sunday was the run game by the Kansas City Chiefs. They basically powered them through the day. Kareem Hunt over 100 yards, a touchdown, had one of his better games in a few years as a Chief. And they should get Isaiah Pacheco back, which will help kind of give them a little bit more of a boost in the running game. But when you look at these two teams and look at how they're playing, the Cowboys, usually will play competitive on Thanksgiving. I know Mahomes has played on Thanksgiving, in the past. He's played well. I think the Chiefs, there are going to be a lot of Chiefs fans there. And I just think in this game, with the Chiefs having the confidence they have, I just think the Chiefs have a little bit of better defense. They're better situationally, and I'll trust the Chiefs can make a few more plays with added support in Pacheco coming back compared to what the Cowboys can do. Though I do understand the significance of Trey Smith, their all-pro right guard, being out due to high and low ankle sprains. That's going to be a positive for Dallas in terms of pass rushing. but I think Mahomes can move enough, and I also think Mahomes has more of a way of, Vandy Reed being able to scheme better and get, the Chiefs players more open and more effectively. And I also would say this, the Cowboys' front seven got better. Their secondary is still pretty much overall not a great secondary. So, again, would I be surprised if the Cowboys won this game? Not at all. The Cowboys have seemed to build some momentum. Again, by hook or crook, any way you can get wins in the NFL, you take them. But I just look at the Chiefs and Cowboys and go, okay, if both teams are, the offenses can kind of match, you can trust and I would trust the Chiefs defense throughout the year more often than the Cowboys, even though these last couple games. I'll take Mahomes to beat Dak in a very fun and creative midday turkey feasting shootout down in Dallas. So that's why Kansas City are -3 and Kansas City straight up. The next game, the Baltimore Ravens over the Cincinnati Bengals. This one to me comes down to the Bengals defense still being bad. Look, the Bengals, Joe Flacco played admirably. He had about 13 TDs, 4 picks. Though you could argue he did cost the Bengals the game last week by throwing that pick 6 to Marcus Jones, which gave him the 7 points that basically was the difference in the game. And look, the Bengals, their defense admirably played well. Drake May did not have a great game. He really couldn't run the ball effectively enough. It really was that pick 6 in the grand scheme of things. But knowing what the Bengals are. So last year, they were 4-8 with 5 games to go, and they asked Joe Burrow to win out, and they couldn't make the playoffs. Now, they even put him a step further back. They're going to give Joe Burrow the last 6 games. And again, their schedule goes Baltimore, Buffalo, Baltimore, before Miami, Arizona, Cleveland. So I will give the Bengals probably those last 3 wins, though Cleveland will be tough. Cleveland should have won the game in week 1. If anybody watched that, it was just that Schmitty kicker missing the extra point in the field goal that gave the Bengals the grind-out win in Joe Burrow's first start of the year. But the Bengals, I don't think they should bring him back. He's not going to have T. Higgins. He didn't have Jamar, or they didn't have Jamar last week. Jamar could have made a difference in the grand scheme of things, but they also got a big benefit off a Geno Stone 33-plus yard pick 6 in the middle of the game where Drake May just sailed a ball. And look, I know, you could say, look, the Ravens, and I will continue to say this, have played a bunch of tomato cans. They haven't played anybody effective or relevant, basically outside of Chicago during this 5-game winning streak. Is it great that we're winning the AFC North? Absolutely it is. But I have not been moved at all by their competition, just due to how weak that competition's been and how ineffective we've looked against that competition. The best game the Ravens have played during this 5-game win streak, you could argue, was the game against Chicago with Tyler Huntley, or the game against Miami where Lamar had 4 touchdowns. The last 2 weeks where we had to grind out ugly, gritty wins, Lamar hasn't thrown a touchdown in over 2 weeks. He didn't have a turnover this week, which is huge. But it's just like you look at the Ravens and go, look, their defense is playing better, but we really haven't played anybody significantly that I feel, a problem in. And this is the argument of not where the defense, because I know Joe Burrow, with the motivation, with even Jamar Chase, Oshie Voss, and Joe Burrow being out there, he's going to put points on the Ravens defense. I just think that Bengal defense is so bad, so banged up, that Lamar doesn't have to run. And I just think with the Ravens, with their receiving core, if they can run the ball with Derrick Henry effectively. Remember, the Jets ran for 200-plus yards. Everybody can run on the Bengals defense. I just think our offense can win a competitive and entertaining shootout just because I feel like we have more talent, we have more motivation, and we have a bit of a better defense that I think we can get 1 or 2 more stops from Joe Burrow than I think the Bengals defense can on us, especially about Trey Hendrickson once again. Should be a great game. This is basically Joe Burrow and the Bengals Waterloo moment. If this is a hot take, if they lost to us, I would sit Joe Burrow the rest of the year. There is no reason why the Bengals, they're not going to make the playoffs at 8-9, and they should fire Al Golden and Zach Taylor immediately at the end of the year because they deserve what's happened due to everything that's going on with the health of Joe Burrow and how putridly and pathetic that Bengals defense has played all year. But I'm going to take the Bengals +7 because it is a division game and Lamar hasn't played that well. And to Joe's credit, Joe usually always seems to play pretty well against us. The issue is he never has a defense that can hold the other team, enough points. I think they lost 40 to 39 and 47 to 45 last year. So I know from personal experience, the Bengals can put up points with Joe Burrow. I just don't know with how the Bengals defense is playing. Even though Lamar Jackson cannot move that well, I still think that in a shootout, I'll take the Ravens at home with the talent they have healthy compared to what the Bengals have defensively in a great, entertaining Thanksgiving night shootout. What a great way for everybody out there to end their day with a hopefully high, entertaining, high offensive scoring football game in Baltimore. So that's like Baltimore here straight up, but this is 90 plus 7. The next game, the Philadelphia Eagles over the Chicago Bears. This one to me comes down to I'm going to trust the Eagles defense, and I'm going to trust that the Eagles playmakers can build enough together to stop having these halves of football. The Eagles may be outside of the New York Giants game, have not been able to put 4 quarters of consistent and confident football together. I objectively believe that. Like, you could look at, the Cowboys game was, fluky. The Rams game in the first half, they were inept. The second half, they were phenomenal. In the game against the Bucks, the first half, they were phenomenal. The second half, they sucked. And then just this past week, first half, they get to a 21-0 lead. By the end of the game, they blew it 24-21. Should have been 27-21 in that case at all. But I just think with the Bears that, look, the Bears defense has played better, but they are very much like, they have a bit of a Steeler complex to them, to where the issue for them is they need to generate turnovers. And I think they're playing the team that turns the ball over, even though last week was standing. I guess going into last week, that turns the ball over the least in the NFL on a consistent basis. So if the Bears cannot get turnovers with how bad that defense has been, especially with the linebacker injuries that they have suffered, even though I know Jalen Johnson and other corners are getting back, so their secondary should be better. But about the linebacker that they have probably going into the game, I think the Eagles can run the ball more effectively. They can pass against the one-on-one matchups. And I think the Eagles know, like when they lost to the Giants from their back-to-back loss, they ended up creaming the Vikings the next week 28-7. So the Eagles usually, after every one of their losses, tend to respond and play a pretty effective and inspired football game the next week. Could the Bears win this game? Sure they could. They're 8-3. They've won, 4 in a row, 5 of their last 6. Like, the Bears, this is a good team. This is a team that's in the thick of the NFC North, and they can win. They can win the NFC North. But just looking at the Bears and the Eagles, the linebacker injuries, the lack of skill position, or the skill position lacking of times of outside of Rome. Even a Burden did make a few nice catches. I just don't think the Bears are going to be able to generate as many turnovers as the Cowboys did, which I think means that the Eagles can control the clock and the game more. And I think the Eagles, with their ground and pound conservative nature, with that defense going after Caleb Williams, I think the Eagles grind out a fun Black Friday holiday win for their team. Should be a great game, and like I said, if the Bears can play well, get a few turnovers, I definitely think the Bears can compete. But in this game, with the motivation, with the talent they have, the injured linebacker for the Bears, I'll take the Eagles here -7 and pretty comfortably. So that's like Philadelphia here -7. Philadelphia straight up. The next game, the San Francisco 49ers over the Cleveland Browns. This game comes down to me to where, look, I do want to say real quick, congratulations to Shedeur Sanders, first Browns quarterback since 1995 to win his first start. He had the three longest completions of the Cleveland Browns season belonged to Shedeur Sanders. He had a 66-yard screen pass to Dylan Sampson. He had the big 52-yard pass to Isaiah Bond, and then the other 30-plus yard catch to Jerry Jeudy, who decided to be Dion, and with his brain, turned off at that moment, decided to get punched out by Jeremy Chin and cost up, a huge play there for the Browns to move. Again, the offense, and kudos to Shedeur, he's earned the right to start at least next week. I would have given him, to the end of the year, because at that point you would have had an equal sample size between Dylan Gabriel and Shedeur Sanders, up or down or indifferent, and you could have compared the two and say, are one of these two guys our franchise quarterback of the future? I don't like that it's a week-to-week thing, but at least Shedeur, for at least another week, gets the opportunity to go with the first team reps and gets to, have his second consecutive start. Again, the story of that game, though, was the defense. Myles Garrett, 10 sacks, just an absolute wrecking ball. But the reason why I'm going with San Francisco is a couple things here. I just think you're talking about the Raiders and the lack of talent they have. And I know the Niners, they're banged up with injuries pretty much all across the board. Christian McCaffrey is leading the league in catches this year. He's leading the league in touches. Like, you are eventually going to wear this man down at this position. Fortunately for them, he hasn't been significantly hurt as of yet, at this point of the year. And I'm not wishing it upon him. But I just think the Niners are just a much better run organization. Even though, to be fair, okay, Brock Purdy going to Cleveland and losing games that really nobody thinks that they should. Even though a lot of people, he lost to P.J. Walker a couple years ago. So, if the Browns find a way to win this game, for Brock Purdy, it's not going to be that big of a surprise, in my opinion. But, and I think that's what it is. Because I think the Browns and Niners, especially with the big news of Brandon Ayuk, like, they have a better tight end. They have a better running back. But I think the Browns have a much better overall defense. The Browns have Judy. The Browns have Bond. They have Phantom. And they have Phantom and Njoku, who's not a bad duo at tight end. Like, the Browns and Niners rosters at this point are about even. And you could argue the quarterback play. Brock hasn't played nearly as well in these spots. And you could definitely see people questioning why did they go to Brock Purdy, especially how he's been playing compared to Mac Jones, who isn't playing pretty much the best football of his career outside of his rookie year. But the thing I keep going back to is with this game is I just think he was playing a Raiders staff that was not very good, that they didn't have nearly as much talent or confidence or identity. The Niners know exactly who they are. Kyle Shanahan and Pete Carroll at this point, that's not even a contest. And I just think for the Browns and for Shedeur, he's going to be in for a much different, rude-based awakening playing a Niners defense led by Robert Saleh compared to the Raiders who had Patrick Graham and Pete Carroll calling plays the other week. Again, would I be surprised if Cleveland won? No. Because like I said, a couple years ago, P.J. Walker beat Brock Purdy in a very similar game where nobody thought the Browns could win because of the Niners' history, and the Niners were able to win just based off Brock Purdy's ineptitude, which could strike again this Sunday for all I know. But with the Niners coaching staff, with their expectation, with the talent they have, offensively and defensively, especially with that Niner offensive line, as good as it's been, I think the Niners will get the Browns to have a more difficult grinding-based game. And I just think, even though the Niners can't generate a pass rush, I think Shedeur is not going to be nearly as comfortable. I just don't think he plays well enough to beat a good Niner team that I think Kyle Shanahan deserves some Coach of the Year votes for what he's done. But I don't think he's going to get it just because of the lack of schedule. But again, Kyle Shanahan, Pete Carroll, Niners roster, Browns roster, even with Shedeur playing, I think he's going to have a more rookie-based game than people expect. And I think the Niners grind another win to get to 9-4 and keep the pressure in the NFC West as hot as they can. So, but that's why I like Cleveland here +6 and San Francisco straight up. The next game, the Jacksonville Jaguars over the Tennessee Titans. This one comes down to, look, the Tennessee Titans and Jags, to be fair, the Titans lost, and they are now 1-10 and, 6 losses away from, unfortunately for them, capturing their second consecutive number 1 overall pick, which is not a great sign to have, especially when you had the number 1 overall pick last year, and you look worse or just as inept. Even though I do have to say, if you watch that Titans game, and I did, that was probably Cam Ward's best overall game. And you could say, what about the game against Arizona where he pulled off the comeback? Yeah, he got the win, but I didn't think he played nearly as well. Again, I'm mad at the Titans because they were able to somehow hold a 13-point spread with a Seattle team that was incredibly mad about how they played. And I guess it was a garbage time touchdown for a backdoor cover. And look, I think if you looked at the Titans and the Jags, it's also just where, the Jags, to their credit, they are 7-4, which I don't think anybody would have expected through 11 weeks. The Jags to be not only a winning football team, but a playoff team. If the season ended today, the Jacksonville Jaguars would have the 6th spot in the playoffs, which is downright surprising. But I think the biggest problem that I think Jags fans have to come to is that Trevor Lawrence is an anchor on this franchise. Like, I think Liam Cohen, what he's doing, is actually just downright phenomenal for what he's done. But you just watch the Jags every week, and it's just a grind. Trevor Lawrence throws 3 horrific interceptions that if you win the turnover battle that way, there's no way, even with Jacoby playing as, solid as he did, there's no way that Jacksonville should have been able to win that game with how bad Trevor was. And here's the sad thing, I think, for Jags fans that they all have to realize, okay? The only thing masking the Jags right now are their wins. If you look at it from a pure number basis, he's basically playing the same as he did last year with Doug. And this is a whole new system. I know Brian Thomas hasn't been there. Travis is out for the year. So I know they have talent around there. But that's with Jacoby. So, and again, this has been throughout the whole year. This isn't just a one-game sample. But Trevor Lawrence just seems like an albatross on the franchise. And I think that is a massive concern for the Jags, especially with the money they paid him and the expectation that they expect. No pun intended. But in this game, though, it's just like in Jacksonville, Tennessee, could Tennessee cover the spread? They couldn't. Because I think Tennessee is at least, if you're going off of last week, played a better game than Jacksonville did. But if you're just trying to pick the game, you just keep going against the one-win team. I think the Jags can, grind out a win. They can run the ball effectively. Hopefully Brian Thomas gets back and he can, kind of make a few more plays. ETN's had a really good year. He had another good 2-touchdown game. Brendan Strange, their number 1 tight end, he came back, and that was a big positive. And I think for the Jags, they can grind out another win against a Titan team that's just not very good. Like, they finally took a big positive step, and I think they'll play better than what, maybe people will look at the record as. But I'll take Jacksonville here. Better coach, more talent, and I'll trust Trevor to grind out another win against the Titans, just like most teams have been able to do throughout most of the year. So that's all. Like Jacksonville here minus 6.5, and Jacksonville straight up. The next game, the Houston Texans over the Indianapolis Colts. This game comes down to one thing for me. Defense. Okay? My argument is going to be this. I know the Colts have the number 1 offense. They have a phenomenal offensive line. Daniel Jones has played better than Davis Mills. He's played better than C.J. Stroud, or they've basically had about a push. I just know that Daniel Jones going up against that defense, I think he's going to have at least 2 turnovers. I would say this, if you had a 2.5 turnover prop bet, I would probably go on the over on that, because that Houston defense is for real. The Buffalo Bills played the Texans on Thursday, and the Buffalo Bills, under Josh Allen's tenure, had never given up as many sacks as they did on Thursday night, which was 8 sacks. Woody Marks and Chubb should be able to run okay. I think the Texans kind of have confidence. They have grit, and I just think the Texans defense could be incredibly overwhelming for Daniel Jones, that I think the Texans capitalize on a few extra turnovers. Would I be surprised if the Colts won this game? No, because the Colts defense has played pretty solid itself. They finally had their full secondary out, and, besides Rashee Rice, nobody else really through the air did anything for Indianapolis in a significant way. But I am going to take the Houston Texans here solely based on defense. I really believe in that defense, and I think with how bad Daniel Jones has shown to be against solid, good quality defenses or winning teams, he hasn't been able to really play well enough, or he generates enough turnovers that give the Texans more opportunities to win games in a tight, gritty way. It's a division rivalry, so you can throw the records out the window. Both these teams know each other incredibly well. I'm just going to trust the Houston defense to cause, 1 to 3 big game-changing plays to the Colts, no matter what the Colts can do against that Houston defense. So, should be a phenomenal game, but again, better defense carries, and I just do not trust Daniel Jones to have a great game, and I expect Jonathan Taylor to have this run shut down, which basically means it's going to be an incredibly limited game for the Colts, and I just think the Texans can grind out another win, especially with C.J. Stroud if he comes back. So, but that's why I like Houston here, plus 4.5, and Houston straight up. The next game, the Miami Dolphins over New Orleans Saints. This one comes down to me to where the Dolphins are on a little bit of a roll. They won 3 of their last 4. They beat Atlanta. They beat Atlanta, they beat Buffalo, and they beat Washington. And New Orleans is right around that range. And it just where, like, I thought the Saints, like, they did cut, the Saints I did hear did cut Blake Grupe, who was one of the, worst kickers in the league. The only guy I could think that was worse was the Rams' former kicker, Joshua Carty, who was now released, and he's gotten replaced by the Dicker kicker, who plays a much more consistent and solid style for kicking. But in another cruddy toss-up game where the roster seemed about even, just in terms of like good defensive players, is New Orleans going into the Miami Heat. Yeah, I know New Orleans, the Heat there maybe isn't that big of a difference. But when the games come down to it, you kind of go in a cruddy toss-up. You go with the better quarterback, and to me that is Tua right now over Tyler Shug with the limited weapons he has. I think the Saints grind out another win to keep their, for the Dolphins, to keep their slim playoff hopes alive, and at the very least, Mike McDaniel now will be able to say he can keep his job due to, at least the Dolphins have not quit on him through all this tough stuff this year, which I give him a lot of credit for. So again, this game could be interesting. New Orleans, they've been more spunky than not. Hopefully the kicking thing can situate itself, and I think, the Dolphins, have enough speed and consistency. But in a game where you have two cruddy toss-ups, you kind of go to the quarterback for the tie. I'll take Tua pretty significantly over Shug, which I think gives the Miami Dolphins the win. So that's like Miami here, -6, and Miami straight up. The next game, the Atlanta Falcons over the New York Jets. This one, pretty much the same idea. The Jets are just so inept. Even though, look, I would say Tyrod Taylor with his legs, Tyrod Taylor with his arm, he definitely played a more solid and consistent game. And they did have a few tough fourth down conversions that didn't go their way. But in this game, like, I'll learn from last week. Like, Kirk Cousins, do it for 199, 2 TDs, a terrible pick six, which I thought could have jump-started the Saints. Unfortunately, it couldn't. They only kicked the field goal the rest of the way through, and that's why Grupe got cut, because he missed a 50-plus yard kick and another 40-yard kick, or no, 39-yard field goal that should have given the Saints more of an edge. That could have changed the momentum of the game, but he couldn't do it, and that's now why Cade York is now in the back on the Saints, and he will be the kicker moving forward, at least for this year. Falcons, Jets, not ideal. Not a great game, not a lot of, star power, unless you're playing fantasy. I just think the Falcons have more talent around them. They have a little bit of a better defensive coordinator. And I just think Kirk, with the weapons he has against the older Tyrod Taylor, I think the Falcons, at least get another, comfort win before they have to go to Seattle and officially get their playoff hopes kicked in the teeth by the Seattle Seahawks. So, but that's all I get Atlanta here, -2.5, and Atlanta straight up. The next game, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers over the Arizona Cardinals. This is one to where I'm going to trust that Bucky Irving is supposed to come back. And look, the Bucs, it's unfortunate, but getting steamrolled by the Rams basically told you, in my opinion, that the Bucs are essentially becoming a Texans of the AFC. They're capped at the second round. And I just think with Todd Bowles and this staff, it's great that Tampa can win the division every year, but if second round is all you can get me to through injuries or any variety of factors, I'm not very, sure if I want to give another $50+ million contract to Baker Mayfield, who has played well throughout his entire Bucs tenure. But this year he's had a terrible overall year. He's hurt. Now with his left low-grade shoulder sprain, and so that would leave Teddy Bridgewater in line to start. I just think with Bucky Irving coming back for the running game with Sean Tucker, with White, and to me, I just look and say, I think Teddy Bridgewater can outplay Jacoby Brissett. Marvin Harrison coming back will be, huge. DeMercado, he can come back, because Bam Knight has played okay, but they really haven't been able to get Trey Benson, running back. And to be fair, Arizona's been a fairly competitive team a majority of the year in a lot of their games. Or, they've been able to play, solid football for the most part. I just think, Arizona going out into the Tampa Heat with more of a limited roster at hand. I think Teddy, he knows how to be a professional. I think Teddy can make a few more throws than Jacoby. He can use his legs a bit more. And I think the Bucs have just better offensive talent that should be able to beat the Cardinals in a way. So again, regardless of Baker plays or not, I think I heard him saying I heard the media say that Baker is more aligned to start next week than this week. But again, I think for Tampa, even if Teddy Bridgewater is starting, I just think he is healthier, a bit of a better playmaker, and I just think a little bit more calm and collected than what the other, what Arizona, has had to deal with. So, again, should be a fantastic game. You always like kind of seeing mid QBs play. But I'll take Tampa here. They're at home. Bucky Irving's coming back. And I've just seen the Cardinals play too many games where they've had confidence in leads and they blow them all in the end in the sad same way more often than not. So, but that's why I like Tampa Bay here, -3, and Tampa Bay straight up. The next game, the Los Angeles Rams over the Carolina Panthers. I am taking the LA Rams here. They seem like the best team in football. Devontae Adams has 8 touchdown catches over the last 3 or 4 games. None of them have been, I think, have been 5 yards or fewer. Matt Stafford's thrown 27 consecutive touchdowns without a pick. He is the definitive MVP favorite right now. That Rams defense has gotten huge contributions. They're phenomenal against the run. They're getting turnovers and turning them into big plays. Kobe Durant and Emmanuel Forbes, the former Commander bust, is having a sensational year with the speed that he's been able to play and the ball getting ability. So give the Rams all the credit in the world. And for Carolina, it's just where, okay, you had your moment. And again, you could say, look, the Bucs not having Baker, that's all we need to just kind of keep pace, half a game behind. But I just think with the Rams, they're just too good, too dominant, and I just don't think none of the Panthers receivers are going to get open. And I just think that Panther offensive line, which has been kind of tough to deal with, different spots of Rico and Chuba. And again, I will continue to say Rico Dowd deserves to have more carries, especially, with what he had yesterday, where he had only 9 carries for 54 yards. But if you average that out, that's 6 yards carry. So, but this game here, like I said, I think the Rams are, one of the best teams, the best team in football. They're rolling. I think the Rams pretty easily curb stomp the Panthers about, some of their other weapons, especially with J.C. Horn, their best secondary player, going out of the game with a concussion. So, I think, can the Panthers maybe make it competitive? Sure, but I'll take the Rams. Healthier, at home, more dominant. I just don't think the Panthers stand any chance. So, that's like the Los Angeles Rams here, -10.5. The Los Angeles Rams straight up. Now I'm going to kind of rapid fire these last few here. Seattle over Minnesota. Minnesota with J.J. McCarthy. J.J. McCarthy looks like the worst quarterback of that class. They seriously need to think about either drafting someone again, and he could be the Josh Rosen of this draft, to where you gave J.J. a legitimate opportunity, and he couldn't really do anything with it, or the injuries. The J.J. McCarthy, I found out yesterday, got put in the concussion protocol after flying home from Green Bay, so he's hurt again. And then, if he is out, then you're literally asking Max Brosmer, an undrafted quarterback that nobody maybe outside of Minnesota knew who he was, and he's going to be the guy that tries to save your season. And again, look, Seattle, they played an overall fantastic game. Job well done to them, another East Coast win. But now you're playing a Seattle team that's motivated, angry, and now, you have the best overall, wide receiver on the planet, Jackson Smith-Njigba, being very close or possibly breaking the all-time receiving record by Jerry Rice. He's broken every Seattle record for a receiver already. So that's crazy in itself. But, when you look at Vikings and Seahawks, this is a game where Seattle's just too good defensively. They just have too much talent. I think, they have JSN, they have Cooper. They can run the ball effectively with Charbonnet. And I just think JJ going into that environment with the crowd noise, with the ability of Mike McDonald as the defense coordinator, I think he's going to get his rear end kicked from pillar to post in a brutal game for the Vikings. So, But this is why I like Seattle here minus 10.5 and Seattle straight up. The next game, the Buffalo Bills over the Pittsburgh Steelers. This one comes down to the quarterback. Both teams, 1-7-4 in second place in the AFC East, 1-6-5 in second place in the AFC North. Like both teams have flaws, have defensive flaws. The Bills can't stop anybody on the ground running. They're all, and the Steelers, have had trouble with stopping anybody through the air, especially with their secondary, especially how they played against the Bears last week. It's kind of where you're seeing two teams that are good teams that, you kind of need one to kind of push ahead, especially with being a big conference game. It's going to be a big opportunity for teams to move forward in that way. But, Buffalo and Pittsburgh, Aaron Rodgers should be back, and I know, that's not the big story. But at the end of the day, when you look at, Allen and Rodgers, even through all the turnovers, I don't expect the Pittsburgh Steelers to generate a lot of turnovers, because that's really the only way Pittsburgh's defense is some way competent, is when they generate a significantly higher turnover margin than their opponent. Also, I do want to say, though, it was cool to see. Congratulations to Mr. TJ Watt for passing his brother JJ Watt, who was at the game for the all-time leading sacks by a man named Watt in the NFL. So good job, TJ. Congrats for him for that moment. But when you look at Buffalo and Pittsburgh, again, would I be surprised if Pittsburgh won? No. Pittsburgh can able to run the ball. And it's weird because every time you watch Pittsburgh, just when you want to believe in them, and I feel like this is going to be one of those games where Pittsburgh's going to play a much more complete and consistent game than people expect. And Pittsburgh is the ultimate tease, to where you will watch them play a game where you don't have them win, and it'll be the game against the Colts where they have 5 turnovers and grind out a tough win. And at the same time, when Pittsburgh plays a more cruddy opponent or an equally injured opponent, you're like, okay, you're better than them in most other ways, but you just somehow can't seem, for Pittsburgh fans, to understand why that keeps happening. But in this game here, Western New York, Western PA, the great Buffalo, Pittsburgh, area frustration. I'm going to take Buffalo here because I think Josh Allen's just playing the quarterback at a higher level. I think both defenses are going to have a tough day, trying to run the ball. So Cook and Warren, it's going to be gritty or a tough fantasy watch for those guys. But I'm going to take Buffalo just because of the quarterback. I just think the other aspects of the talent could go up and down. I don't think the Buffalo offensive line is going to play nearly as bad. If it comes down to a field goal, Boswell will get the win if the Steelers have a chance. But I just think with the lack of a second option receiver, they don't seem to really know how to, on a week-to-week basis, use their other offensive weapons effectively, such as DK, Pat, or Darnell. And, I think it should be an interesting game, like I said. In a game like this where you can look at the rosters, you tend to go with the better quarterback, and even through all of it, I know Josh, and I know Aaron has played better than Josh. I think Josh can make a few more spectacular plays that can drive this victory home for Buffalo. So that's Buffalo here minus 3.5 and Buffalo straight up. Then the next game, the Los Angeles Chargers over the Las Vegas Raiders. The Raiders suck. They're in turmoil. The Chargers, they have a lot of injuries themselves, but they have Jim Harbaugh. They have Justin Herbert. They won this game by about 20 points back in week 2 in Vegas. Now it's at home for them. I think the Chargers were just kind of going, a lot of Raider fans, some Raider fans might show up because of how inept the Chargers seating can be for the hometown team or for hometown fans. But in this one, I think the Chargers are just significantly better in all pretty much facets, and I think the Chargers can grind out a tough win. So that's what I like the Los Angeles Chargers minus 9.5 and Los Angeles straight up. And then the final 2 games, Denver over Washington. Denver's rested. Sean Payton usually does well off a bye. They have the number 1 defense. Will Lutz just signed a big extension. And the Commanders, for as inept as they are defensively, Jaden Daniels, even though he was cleared to practice, he has not been cleared for contact. And Dan Campbell has said that it's going to be it'll be a long-term shot if he plays this Sunday against the Denver Broncos. With that being said, if it's Marcus Mariota going against that Denver pass rush with the limited offensive weapons they have, I think Denver gets a nice, comfortable, dominant, curb stomp type win over the Commanders to continue their role and path to the number 1 seed and maintain the number 1 seed in the AFC West. So that's Denver minus 6.5 and Denver straight up. And lastly, the New England Patriots over the New York Giants. The Patriots, to me, They did suffer a bit of a blow with Will Campbell, who has an MCL sprain who could be put on IR, and another one of their guards has suffered a high ankle sprain. But they're playing the Giants, who have fundamentally been one of the more entertaining teams throughout the year, good and bad, through Russ, through Dart, and even through Jameis. And Jameis Winston definitely had the play of the year when Gunnar Olszewski threw that 25-yard Philly special that went for a touchdown, which was incredible that happened. But when you look at the Giants and Patriots, even with the Pats' injuries, the Giants really don't have any receiving weapons. The Pats' secondary should be able to shut down whatever limited offensive weapons are there. I think that Pats' run defense should be able to play better against Tyrone Tracy and Devin Singletary at running back. And I think where the Giants maybe could generate, enough pass rush to make this a game, I just think the Pats are more disappointing. Josh McDaniels knows playing the Giants, all too well. Sometimes he's had success with it, sometimes he hasn't. But I just think the Pats know who they are, the dominance they need, and I think they get another impressive win to get to 11-2, and probably definitively at that point lock in my opinion, the number 1 seed in the at least lock in one of the top 2 seeds in the AFC for the playoffs. So that's like New England here -7.5 and New England straight up. So that is it. So good luck to all players, coaches, teams, fellow prognosticators, and fantasy football players. I know in a couple weeks here we are entering the home stretch and the playoffs are about to start. So I think that is a lot of fun. And I also want to say next week with my work schedule, a short video will probably come out either Monday or Wednesday morning. Unfortunately, just with time and all that, I don't think I'll be able to have a long-form video this coming week. And then I will tell everybody next week about what day the video should come out next week. And it could consistently maybe be a few-minute video for the next couple weeks with my schedule. But I just wanted to let everybody know that Monday or Wednesday, probably a short video will come out next week for my picks. So I will provide them. Just probably no explanations with them. So, but again, good luck to all players, coaches, teams, fellow prognosticators, and fellow fantasy football players. And once again, happy Thanksgiving to everyone that's celebrating, that watched this video. And until next week, everyone, this is Matthew Fanatic signing off. Until then, everyone, so long.